thing is, Tavi, like I was at the Music Business Journal, what, 3 years ago now, and then I graduated, and I was really drawn to what sat outside the obvious, like stories that were not dominating the headlines. Maybe it was like more of a global view on things. I think music industry is very Americanized. I've been following the journal since I was done there, pretty much, and it feels like you're now engaging more directly with what's happening at the center of the industry. Like it's like tracking the pulse in real time, you know? So you see that in the editorial focus, but also how it shows up on the social media page. There's a lot of like industry news on the Instagram page. When I was there, we pretty much used the Instagram just to post whenever we have an episode or an article ready. And now it's sort of like more of an active following to see what's up there, what you're up to, what's going on the past month. And yeah, so I'm curious how you think about that shift because was this somehow like intentional or did it just naturally evolve as the way we all consume information and pay attention? You know, like how did that start to change? I know there's like sort of a conversation of our patients and how we like to receive news. Maybe articles are not as popular, just an open question, you know? How do you look at that?
So the change was somewhat intentional, but also just, a natural movement towards what's happening right now. I think when we looked at evolving social media specifically, it was just noticing the gap in our audience. We realized that a lot of the Berkeley community was not aware of the journal, which is, surprising given that it's Berkeley's oldest student organization and has been around for so long and has covered so many important things and is engaged with so many important figures. And we just wanted to find a way to reach the community. And I think that if we're not, an in-person, we're not doing in-person events or we're not engaging with the Berkeley community, we felt like they didn't know who we were and what we do. So that was part of the intentional shift to being more active on social media and trying to sort of get in their faces a little bit more. But as the other thing, I think what we noticed was while, the Berkeley Music Business Journal is an academic journal, and that was made very clear to me when I first joined, and that's still very much like the integrity that we're trying to uphold right now is that it's, informational, not necessarily opinionated. It is objective and it's about just education rather than, opinion pieces or like news reporting. But I do think in today's world, there's so much that people don't know or are oblivious to or choose to ignore. And I think what's happening in the industry and what could be counted as news, I think very well interacts with education and like concepts and people things that people don't understand or don't fully sort of people things that people want to learn about, things that you see in the news but you don't fully understand. So I think what we're trying to do right now is see how those two things integrate. And like there's so much stuff in the news about like AI and sync is coming up as this massive space, and a lot of people in like, to a layman, like sync doesn't mean anything, right? A lot of people, who don't work in the industry or students that are just coming into Berkeley, like don't understand how Gen AI is interacting with the music industry. So you see all this stuff in the news, and then, so I think our focus was to post what's going on in the news on like social media. It's like this is our sort of we do something called an industry roundup every month. But then also in our articles, what we're covering is what those things really mean. And we just felt like that was sort of important right now because there's so much, miseducation and so much confusion as to what's really going on. And yeah, that's what we're trying to do.
Like, where do you feel the music industry is most out of alignment right now? Has there been some topics that you know you noticed are really out of space, and where do you see that most clearly?
Obviously, like AI and anything technology related, I think right now is so strange and so like unbeknownst to all of us. Like I think there's so much about it we don't understand and we're still wrapping our heads around. I think even the creators of it and the people that are working with it in their day-to-day lives are also still understanding. And I think that's like definitely a big space where I'm like, wow, there's so much about this I don't know that as a writer, as an editor, I'm like curious to research on, I'm curious to learn about. And the other big thing that I see that is not covered by a lot of music journalism is like the other aspects of the music industry, things that aren't just like, production or the music or live or sync or whatever. So the last year, the editor-in-chief before me, Anna Hudson, did a piece on mental health and music therapy. We've had a piece last year by Max Rothman on photography in the music industry. I think there's so many aspects of it that people don't understand are even like avenues or jobs in the industry and how things interact with each other. So I think for me, like that's what has been the most special about like what I see as like not focused on or things that aren't really like I'm like, wow, I don't know anything about this. I want to learn more.
I see, Tavi, that you work a lot in the live music industry. I haven't gone to a concert in a very long time. I go maybe twice a year now. I used to go monthly when I was in college. So obviously, there's been a bit of change to lifestyle, I suppose. I'm not in a big city anymore. Munich is about 2 hours away from me. And so I only go if it's really really worth it, and of course the tickets are, I don't know, sky high. So is that a topic that you would want to engage in more? Is that something you've been keeping in mind? Live music is something that's been around for a long time, and people back in the 50s have been seeing changes throughout time, and it's not really a new topic, but the changes of pricing and how it's evolving is has become rather different. Is that important to you?
Yeah, I mean, we could spend this whole hour talking about how I feel about ticket pricing. But yeah, live music has become the biggest part of my life. There's something about it that sort of caught me, and I've caught the bug now, and I actually, also haven't attended a show in a very long time. I'm usually working, but and I think it's hard as, when you're working with a team of people, it's sort of hard, like you as an editor-in-chief, like you don't want to push your agenda on how you feel about something. So I'm lucky to work with a lot of people who do very different things to me and are not as engaged in the live circuit. So it's very interesting to see how that all plays out. Um, and I think that's been such a big thing now. It's what you said about the fact that like you won't go until it's like really worth it. And I think that like benchmark of like what's worth it is so different to everybody because everyone's like disposable income is different. Everybody's, how much you really care about seeing somebody in person. My partner had been to like two shows ever in his life before we met. Just because he was like, I don't really care to. And now it's so different because I've sort of tried to open up that world for him. Um, but yeah, I think ticket pricing specifically has been such a strange thing lately. I'm sure you saw with, when Harry Styles announced his tour, the outrage from people who, are fans. Like it's people, it's almost like a cult-like thing, but people were so outraged by the ticket pricing. And the other big thing that I've realized, I've been I've been working with Live Nation and contracting with them, interning with them, etc. And something that I think is so the misconception in the music industry is that like Ticketmaster is earning all the money, which is actually so not true. And especially now in the last like 5 years, the biggest change has been like the artists are setting the ticket prices. And also, like, it's just simple as that, where there are so many show costs and it's expensive to put on a show. So that money is all going into an expense for something. It's not just like being pocketed by somebody. Um, and I think that's important to keep in mind. And the other thing that I think it's also hard. It's hard when you work in live music because then like how much I would pay to see a show is drastically reduced. Because one, I've gotten used to seeing it for free, and the other thing is like I know how it. I think the second you understand how something works and how it's built, you're less likely to invest money in it, unless it is like you think you're intrigued by how it's built and if it's different. Um, but I think it's a really interesting space. I think it's something that is constantly evolving. Live music now is so different to what it was even like 5 years ago, even more different than 10 years ago. Like it's something that's constantly changing. So I think that's been super interesting for me to explore.
Interesting. You mentioned the Harry Styles thing because that got me thinking. When I was 10, I remember Michael Jackson was gonna like perform. Maybe I was even 9. He was gonna like do 50 concerts in London, and that was gonna be like that was it, and that was gonna be like his last. I remember it was such a big deal. Everything was in London, and I sort of looked at that strategy as in he's older and he's already a superstar and things go in his favor now. He doesn't have to have jet lag. He doesn't have to eat shit hotel food. He can just stay in his nice residency in London and now I see like younger artists, not even 40, equivalent to, you know, those of Adele or Harry Styles doing either Munich or New York in Madison Square Garden. Like, is this a new sort of format for artists where it's now in their favor, and the fans need to do all the work, flying around, getting there, paying for flights, hotels to see their favorite artists, and not the other way?
I've been so intrigued by the whole concept of like residencies becoming such a massive thing. And I agree with you. I think initially I sort of thought it's a legacy artist thing. It's they're older, they don't care to travel. It's probably financially sort of easier on the tour. And also just, if you're like Adele, you probably don't want to be living on a tour bus for like 6 months a year. But I also think the couple of things that I've noticed that have played into it are one, the pandemic. I think this was a much bigger thing right post-pandemic because mostly it was just it reduced the risk of cross-contamination. Like when you're not on the road and you're not going from place to place, it's just less risk averse and it's, more financially and creatively viable. Harry Styles actually, he did it. He did like what 15 nights at Madison Square, 15 nights at Kia Forum, something like that. He was still very much on the road other than that, but that sort of stopped him from having to travel within the states to like a large degree, which I, think that sort of helps. And that reduces risk of like COVID related cancellations. And like I think that whole like post-COVID concert landscape was so strange and sort of weird for everybody that I think that was a very smart way of navigating that. Um, and then the other thing is just, something like I'm obviously not 100% sure, but I'm assuming a tour like his, taking that as the example, probably travels with like 30 buses, right? They travel with their custom stage, they're traveling with their video walls, they're traveling with iMag and lighting rigs and like all that sort of stuff. And when you're doing a residency, you're really loading that stuff in once. You're loading it in once. You're probably, doing some sort of tech run through every day. But one, the artist and like the A party, even maybe the B party, doesn't need to be around for that. So that, saves a lot of time. It saves labor cost because you're not going from venue to venue. You're not paying for like multiple drivers. You get to sleep in a proper bed and eat a real meal. And I think, I think it maintains the integrity of the production every night because, you're not having to change it. And you like, once you have it set, like that's what it is. And I think that sort of creates for like the best show from a production perspective. And, I think that's why a lot of people are sort of thinking about that. And I guess the other thing, what, I've heard people like him talk about, people like Adele, is that they just, touring is a lot in your body. And I think people tend to forget that musicians are real people. And it's not just for the musician, but everybody else on your team. Like as a production manager on a big tour, you are the first person in the room at 7 in the morning to like do chalk and lights, and you are the last person to leave once you settle the show, right? And for somebody like that who is sort of, awake and working 18 hours a day and is then doing that every day in like multiple different cities, dealing with, I'm not even bringing in things like jet lag. Like that's not sustainable. And I think touring is amazing and something that wish to do in my life. I think seeing the world is amazing and like that's a wonderful experience. But I also understand why people are now moving towards residencies or, still touring, but like more dates in like certain cities and like not hitting every state and every city in the world. I just don't think that's sustainable anymore.
Do you see a future where this will be normalized for, let's say, at least like the top 200 acts that are out there? And will this in any way affect local venues that are not as prominent as Madison Square Garden or Kia Forum?
I think a venue in Boston, say TD Garden. That's a massive venue, but Boston is not a city that an artist is likely to do a residency in. So, something like that maybe, but also a lot of these big arenas and stadiums in the country don't only profit from concerts. They're, primarily sporting venues. So I like at the end of the day, I think they'll be fine. I also with smaller venues, something like Paradise Rock Club in Boston, right? That's about like 900 cap. Um, I think most of the bands coming through there are still likely to tour, right? If you're playing a 900 cap room, you're not that big. You're popular, but you're not, Adele or Harry Styles. And I think it's not profitable for bands at that size to do something like a residency. Because, if I like one EP you've put out and like, some of your songs are on a playlist and I'm like, okay, the tickets are like $30. I'll go see you. That's very easy for me to do because Paradise Rock Club is a 20-minute drive away. Now, if they're doing 15 nights in New York, I'm like, yeah, I like you, but I'm not gonna pay triple the amount for like a bus and a hotel room to listen to 5 songs I like in New York. And I think that's what's like, and they know that. I think bands that size and artists that size are very aware of this. And I think that's why like touring is still very much going to be a thing. I don't think like residencies are going to sort of like replace touring. I think at the higher level, maybe, and it's starting to a little bit, but I still think there's people who love being on the road, and that's just like the life they live too. Um, I met a band recently who they were opening for somebody, and they pretty much like live on the road. Like they've been on the road like their last like 350 days, and they just go from tour to tour, and like that's just how they like to live. So I think there's always going to be people like that, and I think that those are the people that will keep those smaller venues alive.
When you're deciding what to cover, um, how do you distinguish between what's loud and what's actually important?
A lot of when we decide what we're covering, I try and tap into people's interests. So not just, I think my thought process is that if you want to write about it, you probably want to read about it. And at the end of the day, like I want to make sure that if we're working hard to put out something, somebody's actually consuming it. Um, but again, there's stuff like, I mean, I told my team that if I see another Taylor Swift article on my table, I'm gonna like scream because, I think there's things that are so widely covered. And that's the reason I think we've stayed true to being an academic journal is that like I don't want to hear about like who's marrying who and who just had a baby. That's not relevant to education quite in the same way. It's pop culture, which is, a little bit a part of what we do cover. Even when you're writing academic articles, there's a lot of, background as to who someone is and what they do and all that sort of stuff. But I think, I think what counts as loud can be very different to people. But for me, I try and look at it as like oversaturation and overconsumption. Things that are just like, every other thing that I'm seeing on my page is about this. And then what's actually important may not be like the most important part of the industry, but for me, what's important is like what I'm not seeing. And I think that's how I try and make that difference.
You're making a good point there because for me, it was to see what's been overlooked and additionally where I could raise awareness and knowledge. So when I was trying to look for topics to present to anyone, it would be sort of my focus was a bit different back then. I was very much into the global realm, the African music industry, South American. I was into like crypto and shit. So I was doing decentralized peer-to-peer transaction studies and looking at how we can do user-centric payment systems for artists. In the end, I think the Music Business Journal was never a music tabloid. It was never per se music news either. I see that it's doing a good job covering what's going on lately more than when I was there, but in the end it's about education, as you said, and sort of like showing, as I said, more awareness to things that might be overlooked. So I think that's the main point, and I'm very happy that you keep doing that. It's easy to fall into personal bias and personal interests, How do you work with the team of editors and writers? How do you discuss what to be made? Are you doing a democratic voting? How are you proceeding with things in the team? How does the system work?
Yeah, we try and sort of keep it the same way that you did it. I found that style of leadership very effective. So same thing, we chat about it together, see if anyone has an idea, if anyone, if it's sort of a situation where like somebody wants to write but like isn't really sure what they want to write about, we'll talk a little bit about like what's going on, what seems important, what is being overlooked. So right now, actually, our next sort of print edition, our next theme of articles is like going to be like an around the world theme, because something that I sort of feeling was after I studied abroad in Valencia last year, I came back and I think I was seeing the world so differently, especially in the music industry, and how different it is, and how, like, there isn't such a thing as the music industry, and how every country is so different in the way they operate. And as someone who's grown up somewhere else, I grew up in India, I've lived in the UK, living in the US, living in Spain, it all operates so differently. And I think that that just made me so curious as to how other countries are interacting with their entertainment industries and their artists, and how, the legality of it all and like all that stuff. So our next round of articles, everyone picked a country they were interested in and picked a topic within that to focus on. So it's been really cool. We have an article coming out that's going to be about the Indian independent artist scene, because India is a country that's typically looked at as just like Bollywood music and the film industry, and it's been really interesting for one of our writers to dive into everything that's beyond that. Similar, we have an article coming out about sort of independent music coming from Africa and how it's not just all Afrobeats, and sort of exploring the advent of that. We have the Latin music industry being covered, Latin music in America and how that's sort of growing, and again, that's the sort of thing where like we picked on something in the news, Bad Bunny playing the Super Bowl, which was a, massive thing in the US, and then turning that into like an educative piece about the fact that it's actually been here all along. And that's something that is so overlooked because we're all too busy listening to Western pop music on the radio. Um, and we have one, that's about a little bit more political and about kneecap and freedom of speech in the UK and freedom of speech in the entertainment industry, and how that is changing and the threat to that. So that's maybe like a little bit of an opinion, but still staying sort of still making sure that people are understanding what's going on as objectively as possible, but while also covering something that is really not talked about. So yeah, I think we're trying to, still staying democratic in the sense of like everyone gets to say, everyone gets, a choice on what they want to do, but also making sure that we're covering what's important.
So, actually, I wanted to ask you this. What sparked your interest in the music industry, Tavi? For me, it was, I don't even remember. I think I thought it was a safe choice for college, sort of as a major, but now it's more important to me than anything else. Till this day, people don't quite understand what it is. So, pursuing a career in something that is quite a vague topic, like what sparked your interest for the music industry?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that it was a safe choice for you, because for me it was pretty much like the opposite. I was drawn to the music more than anything. Like that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to make music. I wanted to be an artist. I thought that was going to be like my thing. And my parents were like, "What the hell?" They did not like the idea of me doing that at all. So I actually applied to college for like math and economics everywhere else. Berkeley was my one music school, and sort of the deal that I made with my parents was like, if I get in, I go, like no questions asked. If not, like, okay, I'll do something else. And I just got really lucky that what I wanted worked out. But for me, it was the music. It's always been the music. I think that's like what has kept me going. That is what makes me want to do it every day. I'm just so drawn to like the art of it all. But I think what's interested me the most about like the music industry and like I think once I made my peace with the fact that I like didn't really want to be a musician, mostly because I realized I didn't like want it enough. I think the people who want it and the people the way that they work for it, like I didn't have that. I didn't want to do it. It's not really about like I think a lot of the time it's actually not about like talent at all. It's about like your drive and like I think I'm a hardworking person, but I wasn't working to be an artist. Like I was working towards everything else. And for me, I was like, oh, maybe that's a sign that I like don't want that. And I think, it'll always be a part of me. I will always make music and that'll always be a part of who I am. But I think for me it was like live music. Like I ended up at a festival completely sort of by chance. Um I'd never been to one, let alone worked one, and it changed my life. And just those 10 days being on site, it was Bonnaroo 2024. And yeah, just like I think since then it's been like, wow, this is just that energy and how I think for me, like it in that moment, it became very clear that in an environment like that, it's not just about the music, but about like the community around it. And I don't think I'd ever felt it in that way. And then I did, and I was like, yep, this is me. This is what I want to do. Like this is what it's gonna be forever. So yeah.
It's funny because my parents pushed me so much to, I mean, the tiny, tiny like details or examples of me showing an interest in doing music. They were my cheerleaders the whole time. So of course, it kind of grew on me, and I really, I started playing in a bunch of bands, writing music, and to them, it was like, I don't know, I sort of music business to me, I was kind of like educated like this is what makes the world go round in terms of music, the how to sue and how to avoid getting sued and how touring works and everything. So it's interesting to hear your point of view, and it was funny because it also kind of changed from not just being an artist, knowing how everything evolves around me, how the ecosystem works, but also I started to notice maybe this is what I want to work in rather than around. And I watched this documentary about a huge artist in Norway, and he had this manager from the US who was like all on him. He was energetic, wanted all the best for him. He booked him all the gigs and made sure all the record deals were going through. He was like the best manager, and his energy was 110%. And my parents were like, Philip, you need a guy like that, someone to like lead you around, And I'm like, you know what? I kind of want to be that guy. I'm not sure if I want to be the artist. I kind of want to be that guy. He looks so happy for him. So um sort of that point of view, not necessarily working for artists but working in the industry with the artists and all the other important you know people that are part of the team and putting things together. I love it. You say you work in festivals, that's you get to see how it's all building up. We never knew how it was. We thought they would just come on stage and all the job was done. We never knew who was behind the curtains. And so that whole industry is something that I sort of like love the industry that I hate, I suppose, because it will never feel fair and it will never feel easy, but it's so thrilling to me. And I guess maybe that's why that kind of drew me into the Music Business Journal. Maybe kind of like share more about those topics, what's really going on. How has Gen Z changed not just what you cover, but how you tell the stories? Like what resonates and what gets ignored? Because obviously, headlines, news has to come much faster. They had to catch you in a different way. What can you say about that?
In terms of how it's changed how we tell the stories, I would say like social media is the biggest one. Like actually having to engage with people the way that they consume content. Um, that's definitely been a shift, and that's hard for me as someone who's like I sort of don't like that space. I like being as removed from it as possible, just because I think that's what keeps me sane. But I think that's just like is unfortunately how things resonate with people now is like what sort of short form content are they seeing that is drawing them to something else. Um, and I think the other thing is, I think it's changed for the better in some ways because like I said earlier, I think we're upholding the integrity of being an academic journal that is objective and is, not opinionated necessarily, but I do think something we're doing now that we weren't doing before is introducing conversations about difficult things, especially political. And I think that's something that, often we've shied away from because it's hard to stay objective. That's probably the biggest reason. I think we're all humans and we all have strong opinions on things, and I think it's hard to stay objective on something. But also because, it's the fear of being ostracized, the fear of sharing an opinion that is yours and like staying true to it. It's the fear of representing an educational institution. But I think that's something that we've really tried to make the shift on talking about what's happening in the world right now and how that is impacting our industry because it is. Um, and just not being afraid. And I think that's something that Gen Z is a lot better at than older generations is actually speaking up and not being afraid of what people are going to think. So I think that's we're trying to channel some of that.
Earlier in our interview, you mentioned about AI a little bit. The students at Berklee pretty much are going to be the future of music. It's one of the leading prestigious music schools in the world. And to me, it's much about how they grew up around it, how it evolves around their most, I don't know, cherished music years when they're studying, collaborating with others. And so, how really is AI approached at Berkeley on the campus? Because I feel like it's such an important topic. It will for sure affect the future of the music industry. So, how do people really take it?
I think it's been interesting. I think it's definitely probably changed a little bit since I think probably your, last couple of years at Berkeley was when it was really starting to boom, and I think Berkeley didn't quite know what to do with it yet. I think that's changed a little bit. I think it depends on, professor to professor and department to department. There used to be a pretty strict AI policy about, can't use it at all and stuff like that, which is now changing to using it as a tool. At least, in the business world, I took a contract negotiations class last semester, and we were actually encouraged to use it. Because my professor was sort of just like, well, the reality is that everyone in the real world is using it, so you might as well. Which I think is sort of an interesting approach, right? I think it's sort of just like, I think it's a little defeatist, sort of just like giving into it, but also like, I guess that's realistic. Like that's just like what it is. I'm unsure of how, people working in production and stuff like that, like how that's really worked out. I'm not really involved in that space at all, so I can't speak to it. But I definitely think in the business department and just in that whole space, like it's definitely changing into, I think they're navigating it and trying to turn it into a tool rather than something to be afraid of.
What's been the highlight of your time at MBJ overall? Like a story, an interview, or a moment that really stayed with you?
This is hard because it's been the most consistent part of my life in the last 4 years, which is so strange to say, but from my I think from my first semester at Berkeley when I joined to now, like it is the only thing that I've consistently been a part of. I think I've changed a lot as a person, my personal life, my friends, like everything around me feels so different. What I wanted to do, I came in wanting to do something completely different. What I want to do now is so different. Like everything around me has changed, but I think one thing that has stayed the same is like me and my relationship with the journal. So it's really special to me in that way. I think there's a lot of things that I will say, like I think my first semester, getting to do that Alan Stone interview was really big. Like I still think about that and was like, oh my God, I peaked. Like that was awesome. Because we got to interview Alan Stone on stage live. We had lunch with him the day before, I remember, and he was just the nicest guy and so down to earth and so curious. It wasn't just like, we were asking him questions, but he was so curious about us and our paths, and I think that's so special when you're somebody who's, famous or successful in your field, even. So I still think about that a lot, and I think that was really special for me. And I guess the other thing that sort of the moment has been like getting to be editor-in-chief, I think of something that you've sort of been a part of for so long, like you've really, risen from one thing to the next. The 2 years in between, I was head of podcasting, and um, one of the really special ones that I got to do was an interview with Roger Brown, who is Berkeley's ex-president and runs Salt Lake Incubator. So our conversation was mostly about Salt Lake and not about Berkeley, but he was just the nicest guy, and it was such a special conversation for me to have, and really made me feel like Berkeley was the right choice for me. Because I think like how much he loves the institution and what he did for it, I think was such a special thing to like experience. And I was like, wow, like I see what you see in this place, even if I didn't see it before. And I think that was really special. And I think it's just really cool, like getting to talk to people and representing something. I think that's just been like a really special feeling.
Tavi, you spent all 4 years at Berkeley with the Music Business Journal, now being an editor in chief the past year. It's a pretty unique experience. I was not that long in the music. I would think I was there for maybe 2 years. So this is a big deal for you. Um, you've been part of so many conversations, stories, and ideas along the way. And as you're stepping into this next chapter, what's something from that time that's really sticking with you, and that you think will shape how you approach the industry moving forward?
Wow, that really put into perspective that this is like I'm nearing the end. That feels so strange. I think for me, the biggest thing is like I think something that this, especially the last year, I think has taught me, because like you sort of said earlier, like it's a lot of this job is sort of just like doing it, and you don't really know what you're doing, and you have to pretend like you do. And I think the thing that I will most take away from me is the fact that I don't know anything. I don't know everything, or it's like, and it's okay to not know everything. I think the nature of writing and journalism and all of that at the end of the day is like learning and researching. And I think it's like the process of like not knowing to then knowing. And I think that's something that I'm really going to carry with me is like it's okay to not know now because I will. Um, and that's a really special thing to sort of be able to do that. And I think the other stuff is just I think something that I've really retained from this, sort of what we were talking about earlier with AI, obviously with the journal, it's, I've been very clear with my writers as to like we are not AI generating our pieces. Like that needs to come from your brain and your writing and your language and what you mean and your opinions and your thoughts, right? And obviously we've had a challenging time with that, just given the advent of AI and the fact that everyone's using it. But something that it's made me feel really proud of is like putting out a printed edition without AI, like without that, like, and maintaining original thought. Because I think it's like hard to do that in other avenues of life, and sometimes it's just like easier. And I think we all give in at that in some way. But I think it was really special as like a journal to be able to do that, and it sort of reminded me that like I do have like original thought, and I'm gonna retain that. Yeah.
Really cherish the time you've had, not just at the journal, but at Berkeley, with your college friends and fellow study mates and everything, because some of them you will not see ever again, some of them you will work with, you never know. It's going to be a huge journey. What are you looking forward to the most after graduating?
Honestly, I have no idea. I'm still figuring out what my plan is going to be. I have a little bit more time than my peers. I took a semester off last year in the fall because I sort of needed to realign myself and I wasn't sure what I was doing. I walk in May, but I'm going to do some classes over the summer. I'm headed to Warp Tour um, as a production manager through BPMI, which I'm super excited about. That'll be awesome this summer. And then I think, there's small things like I'm thrilled to never have to do counterpoint ever again. I'm, thrilled that I'll never have to like sit outside 160 um, and like wait for somebody and like that whole sort of thing of like I think I'm at a point in my life where I'm as grateful as I am for college and what it has given me, I'm ready to sort of enter the real world. I sort of feel comfortable with that chapter of my life closing. But I think I'm sort of excited to not know. I'm excited to not have a plan. I think in some ways, like every point in my life until now has had a plan, and it's sort of been working towards this big thing, and now I don't know. But we'll see. I'm looking forward to just having some time for myself and, job hunting, all that sort of stuff. I'm looking forward to just taking some time and slowing down.
You're stepping into an industry that is very unknown and feels not really fair, and is a bit of a fog, but you take it with such a good spirit. Like, you don't really know what's going on, and that's what everyone has to admit. No one knows what's going on. So, go out there, get to know people, see where you can work, and take it from there. And it's all about getting along and be a good person, and I think it works out, and it looks like it already does for you. So you should be happy for that. I'm very happy for you. I often ask people what song connects to their work or what moves them to do what they do, because I interview also people from other fields, not just music. But for you, at the end of this chapter, um, I want to do it this way. What's a song that feels like either an ending or a beginning for you in this context of graduating?
I'm gonna cheat a little bit and say that the song is sort of, to me, feels like an ending and a beginning, but also the present in a lot of ways. But and it's not even the whole song necessarily. My favorite artist is Bon Iver. Um, something about his work is something I've always deeply connected with as a songwriter, as a musician, as a person. And the song Restacks has a lyric that says, everything that happens is from now on. And that has, I think, been like the motto of my life for the last couple of years. I think especially when I like, came into Berklee, I actually have it tattooed as well. But I think that that is sort of like how I'm trying to live my life. So it sort of feels like the beginning in the sense of like, it's from now on was then for me, but it's also the end and like from the day I graduate, like the rest of my life is still from that point. And I think that that is something that is that's a song that I really resonate with and has been a big part of just like how I try and look at life. So that's what I would say.
That's an awesome answer. Tavi, thank you so much for doing this. Appreciate it. I don't know, what is it, Go Jazz Cats? I don't remember what it is. But I'm so happy to talk to a fellow Berklee alum. Stay in good spirits and good luck out there. It's going to be a great time. And have fun at your graduation.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.